Well, did you need the screen share?
Oh, no, that's okay. I'm just just clicking around here. Hold on a second. Okay. I got it. Okay. Make sure I'm not muted here. All right. So I would like to welcome to our Community Engagement Committee, Ms. Kara Stewart. She is of Sappony heritage and is a grades 3 to 5 literacy specialist at Efland Global Elementary School. Ms. Stewart has taught in Orange County schools for 23 years. She also has served several terms on North Carolina's Advisory Council on Indian Education, including on the Professional Development Committee. And she has also served on her own tribal council. She and her daughter together have developed related curricula and have presented in several North Carolina school districts. But this is the first time that she's presenting to our school district, her own school district. Ms. Stewart has also written several articles published in the School Library Journal about instructional strategies and books that affirm the experiences of Native American students. And so we welcome her and look forward to learning from her today. Welcome, Ms. Stewart.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And I love that you mentioned my daughter. That made me smile big time. So good morning, everyone. I really am delighted to be here, and I'm deeply appreciative to Ms. Doyle and Dr. Keeling for reaching out to me and for the board's interest in North Carolina tribes. This is my 23rd year teaching. I did start my teaching career in Orange County schools at New Hope under Dr. Chapman and the leadership of Dr. Bridges. And I will tell you, it was a wonderful way to start a teaching career. And I feel like I've come full circle coming back to Orange County schools in 2015. I'm currently a literacy interventionist at Efland. I was formerly last year and the years prior to that a 3-5 literacy coach there. I've been a literacy coach in Chapel Hill, Carborough City schools, in Wake County schools, reading specialist and interventionist all my career, and I am Sappony. So before I get into all the content that I have for you, I'm going to share my screen with you. We think I will. I was coached on this morning, so let's see if I can follow directions here. Okay. Somebody let me know. It's loading right now. Let me know, somebody, when you can see my screen.
We can see it.
Awesome. Okay, I did it. Yay! And Mr. Atherton, out to you, because I remember, I don't know if you remember, you came by Efland last year and you spoke to me and the K2 coach, and I was like, yes, somebody's here.
Yes, I do remember.
Thank you for that. Yeah, thank you for that. Before we get started, I do want to say, in response to Ms. Hauser's comment about looking for ways to move beyond being the victim, you know, that is a really important thought. And I think sometimes we get, being a victim has become part of the stereotypes about Native people. You know, oh, the poor Indians, oh, we should feel so bad for them. And I'll tell you, my tribe, we're done with that. We are tired of being viewed as victims. We prefer that you know the facts. We prefer that you listen and are open to learning the facts. And there's a big difference between listening and being open to learning the facts, and then support us in the ways we feel like would benefit us and our children and our families, and, you know, increase student achievement. So my tribe is tired of being perceived as the victim. So when I give you a bunch of content, and there is a lot of content this morning, and I'm going to be talking quickly, I really hope it's in that sense that, and I really think from everything I've heard that it will be, that you're open to learning the facts. You know, I think it's so important that people said that they only recently learned about Indian boarding schools. That surprises me, but maybe it shouldn't. And so maybe a lot of what I'm going to present today is something that's new to you and new learning. So that's the way I would like to approach this, is not as victims, but being, here's the facts. So let's learn them, and what can we do about that? So I am Sappony. This photograph, this is our Sappony Tribal Center. And I put a quote up there that I think is particularly relevant. And this was Chief Sitting Bull, in case you don't know, but this is his real name. And before we start, I would like to tell you a little bit about my lens that I see things through, so that you can kind of interpret what I'm saying to you, knowing that, yep, so this is the way Kara sees things. First of all, I see things with an overall sense of literacy in mind. Because I've been a literacy specialist for so long, because I am a writer, I interpret things through the lens of literacy. And when I do that, I've also been fighting for accurate representation with a particular focus on Natives in kid lit, children's literature. So been fighting for accurate representation in the books that are in schools, in books that are newly published and are not accurate, in all of those things. So the accurate representation, to me, is key to everyone learning correct information. And in our case, many things need to be unlearned, as you all pointed out so eloquently. Many things need to be unlearned that are not accurate and give you the accurate information. So to me, that accurate information plus educating the teachers, which is what I've been doing for decades, that my hope is that that will lead to cultural knowledge about us. It will lead to a stronger sense of identity for our families and for our children. It is cultural validation for us, and I think a lot of times that is a part that's left out. And when we have all these things working together, our children certainly can, and the hope is will, be more well-balanced and whole human beings. So Ms. Doyle said many of these things. I've been on the Sappony Tribal Council. That is an elected position. I've served 3 terms on the North Carolina State Advisory Council on Indian Education. That's a position that your tribe appoints you to. The Commission of Indian Affairs and the state superintendent then meet and decide whether or not, yes, they will actually appoint you. So I'm going to be talking pretty quickly because we do have a lot of content to cover. And I would invite you to write down any questions you have, and I'm hoping to leave time for them at the end. I'm going to be moving rapidly through the slides, but I do want to let you know that this slide deck is going to be made available to you so that when there are links on there or things you want to look more closely at, you'll be able to go back and have them right there for you. So let's go ahead and get started. I'm actually going to turn off my camera because I'm way out in kind of rural Person County. I'm just across the Orange County line, and I don't have good internet. Sometimes it goes in and out. So I'm going to turn off my camera if I can, in the interest of
Just
more broadband.
you know, Ms. Stewart, so far your audio is really good, just so you know.
Oh, is
That's
it
fine
great?
if you turn off your camera. Yeah.
Well, I can't figure out how to, so belay that order. Can't figure out how to, so we'll hope it stays good. I did restart it this morning. One thing I wanted to let you all know, when we're talking about American Indians in North Carolina, American Indian is the official legal term in North Carolina. I'm not sure how that happened, but that's a legislative thing. So that's why all the organizations like State Advisory Council on Indian Education, the Commission of Indian Affairs, the North Carolina Museum of History, all these organizations, that's why they say American Indian in this state. You'll also hear tribes like Native American, Native, Indigenous, Indian. To me and to the majority of the Native people that I know, I don't really care what you use. It's fine. Either way is fine. Neither is offensive to me personally, and for most Native people I know. There are some, here's my literacy head again, there are some grammatical differences. So you notice that I just said for most Native people that I know. So that's the use of that term. I wouldn't really say for most American Indian people that I know. It's like a grammatical thing, but there's no difference. You can use any term and it's not really going to be offensive. And if it is offensive to a person, I would hope that they would speak up, but I don't know any people it's offensive to. I also wanted to start off by letting you know that the tribal location in North Carolina, it depends on the time period. So when you're looking at, for instance, the boarding schools going back in history, and as somebody pointed out, Minnesota, you would hear about them, Arizona, New Mexico, you would hear about them. People don't hear as much about the ones on the East Coast. Carlisle Indian School was a famous one in Pennsylvania near Harrisburg. So North Carolina and Virginia in particular, but the Southeast, East Coast, we have been in contact with colonizers the longest of anyone in the United States because of the geography of the United States. So Germans, Vikings, people from Spain, England, they landed here on the East Coast. They didn't land in California, they landed here. So from the 1600s, 1500s, 1400s on, we've had contact with colonizers since then. So a lot of things that seem to be true about Midwest and Western tribes, that's a little different than here. And that's also very different from North Carolina and Virginia. So this is a map that was provided by, it was in a 1983 booklet from the North Carolina Commission of Indian Affairs that they put out and sent out to interested people. You'll notice the spelling of names of tribes is different because when you go back to firsthand historical documents, they spell it any way they can figure out how to do it. You know, they weren't exactly concerned about spelling. So you'll see my tribe is here. And this says at the time of European contact. So for us, the earliest recorded would be about 1607. Now we know it went before that. And then you'll see the tribes like the Tutelo, the Occaneechi, the Meherrin, and you know, you'll notice the Okanichi are here. Well, all of us have moved around, you know, whether we move for political reasons with the colonizers or political reasons with other tribes, which I'll show you in just a second, or whether we moved around, you know, because we had farmland we liked better someplace else. All of these tribes moved all over Virginia, North Carolina, and South Carolina. So it's not like you can say, oh, here, they've been here forever. We've been where we are now since a certain time period, but not always. So I just wanted to show you. And also, you know, this gets really confusing because tribes like the Coharie, the Waccamaw, the Siouan, they are not current tribes. There aren't any more of them. So when teachers go onto Encyclopedia and they see a map like this, it's very confusing because they have no way to tell the difference between who are contemporary tribes and their current, and we should be engaged with them and we should be, you know, pulling information from their official tribal websites, and who doesn't exist anymore. So I just wanted to point out the changing in location. North Carolina does have the highest American Indian population of any state east of the Mississippi. We currently have 8 state recognized tribes. We have 1 that is also federally recognized, fully federally recognized, and that's the Eastern Band of Cherokee. We have one tribe with limited federal recognition, that's the Lumbee, and we have 4 urban Indian organizations. The federal and state recognition, it's more than just culture. It's more than just validation. We do have a government-to-government relationship with the states of North Carolina and Virginia. Federally recognized tribes have a federal-to-federal relationship. We do have our own constitutions, our policies. We have governing bodies and structures and procedures. We have our own flags. So that's important to know. And federally recognized tribes like the Eastern Band, they're sovereign. They have their own police. They have their own laws. That doesn't mean they don't follow the overarching laws of the state, but they have their own, as well as judicial systems. When I was saying about the Indians moving around from Virginia, North Carolina, and South Carolina and going back and forth, there are 3 major linguistic groups of North Carolina Indians, and my tribe, the Sappony, are Siouan, and then you can see the others there. And if we, a way to think of it, a way that I explain this to 4th and 5th graders when I do presentations there is that, oh, and by the way, I just wanted to let you know too, I said to Ms. Doyle, don't you think maybe should the board know about, like, shouldn't they have at least as much information as I give 4th and 5th graders? And she was like, huh, but yeah. So this is what I teach when I go into the classrooms. So the Siouan tribes, it's almost like, cousin tribes. The languages, the traditions, the customs, they would be more similar to each other. Iroquoian tribes, cousin tribes. Algonquian, they don't have anybody here, but yes, they do. So yeah, so that's the historical root of the tribes. And here's a map just to orient you as to where and who our tribes are. So here in blue, of course, in orange and Alamance, we see the Okanichi currently. My tribe, the Sappony, is up here, and it's important to point out this is only a map of North Carolina. We are the only tribe who is also in Virginia. We were here before the state lines were drawn. One of our own people actually helped to draw the state line. His name was Ned Bearskin, actually, in 1728. He was part of the survey party that went with William Byrd as he was directed from the Raleigh governor at that time to draw the dividing line between Virginia and North Carolina. So one of our people actually helped draw that line, but our people have been back and forth and traveling that area since then. Haliwa-Saponi are in Halifax and Warren. That's where they get the name Halawa. The Meherrin are in Hereford County. The Koharie are down in Sampson and Harnett counties and going around south. The Waccamaw are in Bladen and Columbus counties. The Lumbee, which most people have heard of from North Carolina, the Lumbee and the Cherokee. The Lumbee are down here in Robinson, Hoke, and Scotland counties. And then, of course, we've got the Eastern Band of Cherokee in Graham, Jackson, and Swain. So all this means is currently. And it means currently homelands. Of course, you can find a Cherokee person living, in Sampson County. You could find a Hopi person living in Durham. So that's why we have the Indian urban organizations. These are the ones in gray. There's 4 of them, and you can see them down here right under the map. We've got the Triangle Native American Society in Raleigh, Metrolina in Charlotte, Guilford Native in Greensboro, and Cumberland County in Fayetteville. And the purpose of those is to be a service organization for any Indian who lives locally, and it's service and community. It is so important for Native people to have community. So of course, if there's and by the way, only people from North Carolina say Cherokee when they're talking about Eastern Band. We think of this as the only Cherokee, but when you're talking on a national level, if you say Cherokee, they think Oklahoma. So that's the bigger Cherokee tribe. So if there is an Oklahoma Cherokee person or a Hopi person or a Pueblo person, and they happen to live in Raleigh, they're going to be very lonely for Indian community. And so they could go to the Triangle Native American Society and join that, and they would get that sense of service and community. So that's where our tribes are currently. And I wanted to start, I was going through the tribes and I was thinking, how could I present this to you in the most clear manner? And I decided that I would use my own tribe, the Sappony, because number one, I know the most about them. And because when you're thinking about the North Carolina tribes, there are some similarities. Now, of course, there are specific differences, but we were all agricultural based tribes. We all have initiatives different, but we all have different initiatives that we want the public to know about. We all have our own government. We all have our own sense of community. So while I'm going through the Sappony, I want you to understand and realize that all these things also apply to the other tribes in North Carolina. We also all have our own insignia. And if you look up at the top right, that is our Sappony insignia. So we call ourselves, our community, the location is the High Plains community. We have about seven families, 7 clans, 1,000 members, and our initiatives, we do economic development initiatives. We have healthy living initiatives. We do 5K and heritage camp to teach our youth about their heritage and continue some certain aspects of that. When I go through the other slides, you'll see that in the on the slide, usually in the top right, I've put every tribe's insignia. The insignias are made up of things that are important to that tribe, for maybe historical reasons, maybe for subsistence reasons, but that insignia has a particular meaning to that tribe. So you'll see that. And I've also put at the bottom left of the slides, the official tribal website, so that you can go to those to look to see more information if you are interested in that. So here's our tribal government. We do have a chief. This is him up here in the white shirt and the khaki pants. We have a chairperson, we have an executive committee, and we have an executive director. And then we have representatives one representative is elected from each of the 7 clans or families. And this is actually the exact same way that it was structured in the 1600s. That wasn't intentional. I think we carry with us far more of our history than we realize we do, but that's the way we set it up over and over and over. And it wasn't until we went back to the firsthand accounts, the John Lawson Journal, things like that, that we realized, wait a minute, they're talking about 12 people on the council just like we have now. And then we researched more and found out, actually, that's a holdover from the 1600s, but it still works. Our flag has our insignia on it. The 7 stars at the top represent our 7 families watched over by God. The 3 arrowheads are a historical Sappony trading symbol with the colonists. In the times of Fort Christiana, which was 1714 to 1718, the colonists required all the tribes to come up with a symbol so that they would recognize who they were and be able to recognize friendly tribes versus non-friendly tribes. And our symbol was the 3 arrows. Sometimes it was tattooed onto the chest, sometimes it was tattooed onto the back or the shoulder, and sometimes the women wore a gorget with that so that they could be immediately recognized as Sappony. So that's what those arrowheads symbolize on our insignia. As an agricultural tribe, tobacco, corn, and wheat have been our subsistence crops. At times we owned land, and at times it was mostly sharecropping for white farmers who owned the land. The 7 feathers tied together represents our 7 families interdependent on each other as we have been throughout history. So farming, along with our Indian church and our Indian school, allowed us to remain self-sufficient. And here I thought you just might want to see, it's always helpful to see pictures. So our tribal center is up here in the corner, the top left. This is the woman with the purple shawl across her arm. That's our chairperson, Dorothy Stewart Crow. We do have a walking trail up there, and we have planted native fruits and trees on our walking trail. A picture of our walking trail. Tobacco has been part of our history for many years. One of our events is the Quilting Bee. Men, women, boys, girls, everyone quilts. Just some pictures of our area here on the bottom left. And this is our chief, Otis Martin, in the middle. And on the right is a picture of Mayo Lake. We hold a lot of events up at Mayo Lake, which is towards the north of Roxborough. It is actually a little bit south of our tribal center. This was actually it is a man-made lake. It was made for the power company, and the area was flooded to make that lake. That was part of our community. So there are homes, our graveyards, still some of that is underneath that lake. Quick touch on some of the timeline points. 1607 is the first recorded history from Europeans of us in Virginia. 1714 again was Fort Christiana, and this is a picture of the five-sided fort right there in Fort Christiana. It actually has a historic marker there in Virginia at that site. And our children did go to school there, but going back to the documentary that you saw, this began with Governor Spotswood, and in return for keeping the peace, our children were hostaged. So they figured that they would keep the cooperation of our tribe by keeping our children. And as it happened, it did work. That model, that precursor, was expanded across the United States in the next 100, 200 years. And there were many schools like that. One difference with this school is that I can happily say that there was eventually hired there a teacher that we all loved, and he was a good person, a good teacher. Even though the function of that school was to Christianize us, to turn us to Christianity, and to assure the cooperation of our grown people with the government of England, and to have us be Christians and learn English, we kind of took that opportunity as, yeah, okay. We will know our ways and we'll know your ways. And we were then able to interpret things that they probably did not want us interpreting, like treaties. So our children were then able to be liaisons for us and to our benefit because of this education. And because it wasn't the same setup as the punitive later boarding schools that you saw, it was hostage and secured, but it wasn't the same punitive arrangement as the others. So we could learn what we could learn from it. And I think that worked to our benefit. We have been in our current location in High Plains, in and out since the 1600s, but kind of permanently there in the 1720s, 30s, 40s, and certainly the 1750s. Another point, going down to 1911, that's when we received state recognition from North Carolina as Indians of Person County. And then we were able to get funding for our Indian school, which if you go back up to the 1830s, that was our first church that we made. And in the 1860s and 70s, we had one room in the basement of the church that we deemed our school. and we ran it. We had our own people teaching the children what we could teach them and we felt they needed to know. In 1888, we received our first formal Indian school with board representation. But again, that was not funded by any outside public entity. It was completely funded by us until 1911 from North Carolina. And because we're across both states, in 1913 in Virginia. So when I say funding, well, you know what? Let's skip that for now. I'll get back into it when I get into schools. Hold that thought. Indians of Person County is what the state of North Carolina named us. We changed our name to be more reflective of who we actually are. I think it was 2000 or something. Oh, here, 2003, before we actually changed that legislatively. Similarly, the Lumbee were called Indians of Robeson County. Before that, the Lumbee were called the Croatans by North Carolina. So we, we were named. The church and the school has been the center of our community forever. So this is our Calvary Baptist Church in 2 separate time periods. This is our High Plains Indian School in 2 separate time periods. And this slide, I do want you to remember later, W. Lee Stewart, who happens to be my grandfather. This is here on him on the left. He was a Hunski, which means the head man of the Sappony for a number of years. He was instrumental in bringing schools to our tribe, bringing funding, public funding, state funding to our tribe. He and other Sappony leaders sat on our Indian Board of Education. He traveled to Raleigh and to Washington, D.C. many times to advocate for our children to have education, to have better education, to have funding, to have any funding, to have better funding. He also networked politically to our advantage. He wrote senators and governors. He was also instrumental in getting us recognized as a tribe. And the thing about that I want you to remember as we go down through another slide later. So this young man, this little boy here that my grandmother's holding, that's my Uncle Tony. And Tony went on to become Dr. Tony M. Stewart, Superintendent of Public Schools in both Virginia and North Carolina. Before he passed away in 2009, he was the superintendent of Elizabeth City Schools. He was also superintendent in Buncombe County and some others. So my grandfather, the Reverend W. Lee Stewart, who, because of our lack of funding and because of our agricultural existence, he only finished 3rd grade. My grandmother might have finished 4th, we're not quite sure. But his belief in his children, our children, the education of our children was so strong. He and some other people in our tribe, the education has been one of our most important initiatives. That is a little bit different from some other tribes. These photos were taken in about 1942, in case you're wondering, and this is my dad clutching his little bag of treats. So the community is agriculturally based, as are all the North Carolina tribes, tobacco being a big thing. Quilting is a very competitive sport among ladies and men. All the tribes, the Koharie especially, Sappony, they have a lot of quilting competitions. And you might not also know that in the United States, American Indians as a whole, all tribes have the highest percentage in the service in the armed forces than any other marginalized group. And again, I'm only pulling pictures from my family because that's what I have and that's what I know. But any family that's Native in North Carolina could put hundreds of pictures up of this. And I do want to point out my aunt, Lois Epps, down there at the bottom. She couldn't finish high school because that's my great aunt, that's my father's aunt, but we don't actually separate ourselves like that in Indian culture. She couldn't finish high school because it only went to like the 7th grade when she was coming up. But she was determined. She didn't want to be a farmer. She didn't want to be a farmer's wife. And that's what became, that's what happened in that community. So she was determined. She said if she could have been a teacher and been hired to teach our children, she would have, but she knew that would not happen because we were not allowed to have Indian teachers. So she decided that she would join the Army and become a nurse. And then she was put on the same playing field level with white people who had graduated college, and she had to pass high school, college, and nursing school on the same level with them, and she did it. She taught herself. She became the first Saponi woman to leave home without without her family, without her parents. That's kind of unheard of at that time. So, it's like protection. So that's another thing that I'm proud of that will, again, point you to the importance of education to our families. All the tribes in North Carolina have a lot of events that they do. The events are different. Here's pictures of our Saponi homecoming. Homecoming is not like a high school football game. It's a 3 or 4 day event. The Lumbee have a really huge homecoming. I think it lasts all week. I think theirs is in July, but I just wanted to show you some events. Quilting Bees is every January. Our fall stew is October, November every year. We have a cultural heritage program. We have a camp that lasts for a week in summer for our youth. Tribal center dedications. We have a 5K that happens. It's open to the public. And this is a 10-minute video that you can watch yourselves. This is a video that we created for us, by us. The North Carolina Museum of History has a fantastic event every November. And this year, since it was virtual, they asked that all the tribes create a video no more than 10 minutes telling about themselves. So in the notes, you'll see that there's a link at the bottom. You can watch any of the tribes' videos and anything else you're interested in about the event. It's a wonderful event. It is open for school children on the Friday, and it's open to the public on the Saturday, and it's a great event. No, we don't want to start that. So I'm now going to show you the other tribes. And just to orient you again, here they are. And I guess I'm kind of doing the rest of them alphabetically. So we'll be starting with the Koharie here. And just to show you a brief slide about them. And again, I have put the link to their tribe at the bottom, the official tribal website. Here is their insignia. They do have about 2,700 members, and some of their initiatives are the Koharie River Initiative, which is a huge thing. It's very popular. They've been cleaning up the river. All their youth participate. They also have really nice community gardens, so they all come together as a community to farm, and they all benefit from that. They have community talking circles, which begins to address substance abuse, emotional abuse and trauma, and they are very successful. Here's the Eastern Band of Cherokee. Their insignia has Cherokee writing on it. They are the only tribe with full federal recognition. And they run their own schools. They run everything themselves now, which is fabulous. They have that Koala boundary, which is a sovereign nation, 100 square miles. This, I think, up here is a picture of their, they have a health facility, all kinds of things. The Halawa, that's Halawa and Warren counties. So the Haliwa-Saponi, the Saponi proper, us, and the Occaneechi Saponi I think there's some confusion perhaps about the name difference, similarities. And what I will say is that I went to school in, I grew up outside of Philadelphia. I went to school, to high school in Westchester, not New York, but outside of Philly. And I didn't get the message that history is fluid and history changes based upon how much we know and how much we are learning. So history, as written by the victors, is presented one way. And when I grew up, it was textbooks that rarely changed. So the textbooks presented the victors' history one way. And I was taught, and I picked up, I guess, I assumed that that's just what happened. And that's not really such the case. So as we learn more, as we delve more and find more sources for our histories as tribes, the Halawa in the 70s, they did research and they came up with that they are connected to us, the Sappony. Turns out not so much. So that's a little bit of a misnomer now, which they now recognize and acknowledge. But, you know, that's now their legislative name. Okanichi, similarly, they have connected themselves to us through their written history, and some of that may not be quite on target as it was when they were recognized. So that explains the names there. The Halawa have about 3,800 members. They are a big tribe as far as North Carolina goes. They have a fabulous powwow every April. They have people engaged in language preservation, which largely consists of the Tutelo language. The Tutelo were one of our cousin tribes. There is no Sappony language left. There is Tutelo language left. There is Cherokee language left, but other than that, not so much. They do culture classes for their youth, and Sonora Lynch, who is a Halawa citizen, did the walkway at UNC that's right outside of the gift shop, I think. And it's beautiful. You should go down there and see it. It has statues lining all the sides. It's a beautiful thing. If you have not seen it, you should go see that. Sonora has also had artwork in the Smithsonian Museum. Glee Richardson, Ogletree. She was on the State Advisory Council for many years. She's lovely, she's intelligent, and she is right now our only woman chief. And saying that, let me just say that Indian societies on the East Coast are very matriarchal societies. So our women have large roles in our governing and in our in everything. We have equal or more power than the men do. Oh wait, how do I go back? Because I wanted to show, I don't know if I can go back. When you go back, look at the Halawa's insignia. It is beautiful, beautiful. So go take a look at that. And on their website, it tells what all the things mean. The Lumbee are the largest tribe east of the Mississippi. They are the largest non-reservation tribe. They're the 9th largest tribe in the nation. They have over 55,000 members, which is enormous. And so they have different initiatives like the Lumber River Initiative, similar to the Koharie. They do a lot of patchwork. Pine cone patchwork is one of their heritage things. It's like quilting, but they look like pine cones. And their insignia it's essentially a medicine wheel and medicine wheel colors, traditional medicine wheel colors. And on their website, they do explain that too. The Meherrin also have a gorgeous insignia up there, and I believe that's explained more on their website. This was their chief for many years, Chief Wayne Brown. Sadly, he passed away last year, I believe, and I'm not sure that they have fully replaced him. They have culture and language revitalization and an annual powwow. And the Occaneechi, you see their insignia there with the hawk and the canoe. Their community is called Little Texas. They have about 2,000 members now. They are doing talking circles and healthy living classes. They do have their own farm garden, just like the Kohari do, that I think is a community garden. And this is Miss Vivette Jeffries Logan at the powwow at NCSSM. NCSSM has had, North Carolina School of Science and Math has had one of the longest running multi-nation powwows of any school in the area. It's a fabulous powwow that usually happens in February. My daughter went to that school. The Waccamaw Siouan, they call themselves the people of the falling star. They have a legend about a star falling, a comet, over Lake Waccamaw. They have about 2,000 members. They do community gardens. They do talking circles and powwow, and they have a summer youth camp. So and this is their tribal center here. Indian schools. This was the start, the very start. In 1868, the North Carolina Constitution, it said that they would create a public school system free for all the children of the state aged 6 to 21. 7 years later, they were like, yeah, but not like that. They said the Constitution was amended to specify that the children of the white race and the children of the colored races should be taught in separate schools. So yeah, go to school, but not like that, not with us. So the American Indian communities at that time were concerned for the quality of their children's education should they be segregated, which they were. A couple things to understand about all historical Indian schools in North Carolina. You know, we're talking the 1800s, and they were multi-grade, some of them one classroom, multi-grades, multi-age. Most of them did not go through to the 12th grade. There wasn't any funding for that. And there wasn't any funding because that wasn't a belief that that was something that was good for the state of North Carolina. It was common for state and counties to require the Indian communities to come up with the land, the labor, the building materials for the school. In other words, yeah, we might help you fund it if your state recognizes and if you can come up with the land and build it yourself. So it was also common at that time to open and close school buildings and change them. And that happened because of these other things, funding, lack of funding, new funding, closing a substandard building if they could have built a better one. All these things played into it. Also, when something is called a normal school, that means a teacher training school. And historical norms would still apply. So agriculture-based, just like many rural schools of white children in North Carolina and Virginia, there was seasonality to it. And you dropped out if you were needed at home on the farm. And many of them closed during planting season and harvesting season because the children couldn't come, they were needed at home. And that was true of many agricultural schools. So again, using my tribe school as the detailed example, but understanding that these examples, the details may change, but the overarching concept is the same. And I think have not researched African-American schools, but I think these overarching concepts are going to be pretty similar if somebody comes and presents about African-American schools. So 1714 to 1718, again, was the time of Fort Kirstana, which again started badly, and we found a way to turn it to our advantage. Because after that, we became one of the lead tribes known to work with the colonizers. So you can do a lot when you're in that position. After we came to where we are now, High Plains, we had one room in the church in 1878. 1888, we got that school board representation and we built a one-room school. We did not receive funding until 1911 from North Carolina, 1913 from Virginia. The states paid for the teachers and the books. The community was required to build the buildings and the playgrounds. Person County did give us one window sash. I want to give them their due. When the building was complete, the curriculum, as you might expect, was limited and inadequate. Only white teachers were allowed by Person County and Halifax County. They sent them. This is different than the Koharie and the Lumbee. They got to teach their own. We did not. Person County sent, in Halifax County, Virginia, they sent teachers and principals. And I don't know if there's any, like, I'm going to say this as tactfully as I can. They sent the teachers who could not perform well or were removed from the white schools. Sometimes they were removed for inappropriate contact with little children. That's who we got. I am saying what you think that I'm saying. In the 30s and the 40s, our school was well attended. In the 30s, we served, and looking at our old school board records from the 30s and 40s, we served 7 grade levels. We had upwards of 100 children, 115, 120 children. We had no running water, no gym, no cafeteria. The library is recorded in our board minutes as being 1 shelf in 1 classroom. About 1950, we did have a cafeteria added, and there in the bottom right picture, you can see that renovated school. And in 1952 is the first time that the school went through 12th grade and had a graduating class and curriculum and teachers to support that, but the curriculum was still inadequate. Over on the right, this is 3 members of the first graduating class in 1952. And in 1962, the assimilation was happening and schools were closing that only served children of color. But let me say, North Carolina was not quick on the draw, neither was Halifax County, Virginia. I think it's the Koharie school didn't close because other schools weren't open to them until 1967 or 68. Some communities, might be Roanoke Rapids, did not really integrate until 1970, early 70s. So when you say assimilation, like that could be the law, but that's not necessarily what happened. So our Indian School Board voted to request that our students, high school students, attend larger, better funded schools at the time that assimilation was happening. Person County granted that. Halifax County did not have anywhere that they allowed our children to attend because they still had separated schools, segregated schools. So those folks, those children of ours that are still in our tribe, they just happen to be across the Virginia line, they attended Person County schools. And so Person County and Halifax County split the funding, school buses and teachers and all things like that. Here is our historical marker. Our school is no longer there. I'll just give you a minute if you want to read through that yourself. And so when I say that the church and the school were the centers of our community, they really were. There were a lot of really fun activities. There was a school play every year. They had every member of the community, whether they had kids or not, went to the school events. They had things like the girls would make buckets. That was the lunch boxes, buckets. Picnic baskets for the boys to raise money for the school. The boys would bid on them. You know, the girls they were sweet on, they would buy their baskets. There was just fun stuff that happened at the school and the church. And when you think about it, we had 7 families that were used to, for hundreds of years, we stayed to ourselves up in the hills, up in the isolated area for a reason. So we stayed there and we were used to riding the bus and having our cousin be the bus driver and having, you know, somebody knock on the school door and say, here's your lunch. You know, we were used to playing with our brothers and our sisters and all our hundreds of cousins. We were used to that. So when the children got shipped out, we lost a big social center of our community, and the children now had to face racism in school, which they did not have to face when it was just us. So one thing that I had wanted you to remember was the slide of my Uncle Tony, and my grandfather and grandmother and my father. So after I gave you that detailed slide of all the history of our school 2 slides ago, I just want you to keep in mind how remarkable that is, that those children, all 4 of their children went to college, graduated college. Tony obviously had his doctoral degree. And you're talking parents who went to 3rd and 4th grade, and there was a limited curriculum. So I want you to understand how remarkable that is. And we are not the only family in the Saponi like that, nor are we the only family in North Carolina tribes like that. On these slides, I have continued to keep the official tribal website there for you. And at the top, I have put the name by which we call each other and people who know tribes call each other. So the Koharie did have 1910 to 1938, the Shiloh Indian Sunday School, which was, as our school in our church was, more than a church and more than a school. They were then given the New Bethel Indian School until 1941. And here again, they used their own funds and their own teachers. We weren't allowed to do that. In 1911, the legislature gave them their own school system, and that was New Bethel, but they took it away again in 1913, but then it was reinstated. So when you see schools closing and opening and gaps in learning, that's why. And probably their most famous is in 1943, they were given the East Carolina Indian School. This is still in their community now, and it is their tribal center. That's where all their gardens and everything is now. And they house their administrative offices there now. The Eastern Band, EBCI, that's what we call them. We don't ever say the whole thing out because it's long. Starting in the 1800s, operated by the Quakers. U.S. Indian Service, later named the Bureau of Indian Affairs, then operated their schools until 1954. 1962, again, assimilation. The community day schools were closed and they had a central elementary school. It wasn't until 1990 that they were allowed to and became able to operate their own tribal schools. At that time, their council authorized their Cherokee Indian School Board to operate the schools. That is a good thing. They incorporate American Indian culture. And if you look here, I have just a picture on their websites. They have a whole section for culture. They have it Cherokee specific, but also larger than that. So they have about 1,300 students in their K12 system, 1 elementary, 1 middle, and 1 high school. And those schools are doing very well. The Halawa, we don't ever say Haliwa-Saponi. The Halawa, I mean, they don't either. The Halawa are the only ones who have their school is still running. It is the Halawa Tribal School. That charter school was established in 2000. It's K12. And it does serve the kids in Halawa and Warren counties. 1957, it operated as a private Indian school. So, you know, it's gone back and forth being used as a community building. And now again, it is a school. They also have a heavy amount of American Indian culture that they incorporate. I actually was a consultant for them. They were trying to bridge the gap between their cultural education and the standards. So I helped them to map the standards, the state standards, to their cultural education in science and social studies and ELA. So now, after those sessions, they would have the tools to go back and say, okay, so we're doing a session on the river and we want to test the water, but we need to tie it to our science standards and our ELA standards and anything else and make sure we're rigorous in that. So that is a more recent push. And here's a picture of some of their graduates, and you see their insignia. The Lumbee they had a number of K12 schools, and I feel like I wasn't able to find as many specifics on them because it seems that most old records concentrate on the Croatan Normal School, and that is now UNC Pembroke. It's gone through many iterations, but the Croatan, remember I told you they were called the Croatans? That's just like my tribe was called the Cubans. So we were the Cubans until they decided to call us Indians of Person County. Lumbee were the Croatans until they decided to call them Indians of Robeson County. So that opened the Croatan Normal School to train teachers. It was multi-age. If you look at that picture, you can see all different age students there. That opened in 1887. And then it was called Indian Normal School instead of Croatan Normal School. By 1916, that's the middle picture. And then they were featured in Life magazine, and that's a picture of that. So they did have many high schools. It's a large area that they're in. So I have the names of the high schools that I could find up there and the different schools that I could find opening and closing dates for there. So the tribes are the ones that have the specific information. If I go in to find information about these schools, I might know more than somebody who's not a native North Carolinian. I might know different places to find information, but I don't have it all. Just like a Lumbee person would not be able to know all the information that I found about the Sappony. So the tribes are the ones that keep the detail about those. So if you're interested in more detail about any of those, the tribes would be the one who has that information. So according to the United Tribes of North Carolina, and we do have a conference every year. So in our 2008 year, they highlighted the Indian schools, and that was the focus for that conference year in 2008. And they have an explanatory paragraph in there about the Okanichi and the Meherrin. Prior to public school desegregation, not all Indian tribes in North Carolina who have state recognition now attended a separate Indian school. Two such tribes are the Maharan and the Occaneechi. So they said that the Occaneechi attended McCrae School prior to 1924 and Martin School 1924 and later. And the Indian tribes saying this information, that means that the Occaneechi supplied that information because there are Occaneechi people on the United Tribes board who creates this. So that means that that was the information supplied by the Occaneechi. So I did find a picture of the McCrae School down there at the bottom left. And there's apparently a renovation project underway that started in February of this past year. And there's the link for that. When the McCrae School closed in 1951, Pleasant Grove opened in 1952. And of course, that's not the only schools. McCrae, Pleasant Grove, Martin School, I could not find any record of, and Efland Sheiks. So Efland Sheiks history does go back to early 1900, and it was a Rosenwald school, which I didn't know. So if you don't know about Rosenwald schools, you need to click on that and learn. So that is a program where extra funding, extra schools was sent to certain largely African-American schools all throughout the South. So that's the Occaneechi. And the Waccamaw had several Indian schools going way back. And I would assume that they probably funded most of those themselves, just like most of us did. And so there's an article there, again, a push that I found out that started in last year, I think, by the archaeology department. And I'm so glad I went to this detail to find information about these schools because I learned a lot doing this. There's an archaeological project underway to map the North Carolina American Indian schools. And the ones I'm showing you and telling you about now, that's not even the tip of, that's not even the tip of the iceberg. There are many, many, many more that have no record anymore or are defunct or that kind of thing. So I assume that's why the Department of Archaeology is mapping those. So I also have resources for you. The North Carolina Commission Affairs is a good source of information. The North Carolina State Advisory Council on Indie Education. That top link you would probably want to click on just to know what it is. When I was on there, I was on the Culturally Responsive Instruction Committee, and I, along with my committee, developed many of the website resources that are on there now. Unfortunately, they have not kept up with that since I left and updated them, but they're still there. That is a really good source of information. If you go to this link called American Indian Education, you can get the State Advisory Council annual reports. They have them there online for 2017 to 2020. These are the reports that that Advisory Council makes every year. And it's largely Title VI districts that think they're the only ones who should be concerned with them. But I faithfully brought them back to Dr. Chapman and Dr. Bridges when I worked in Orange County before, because it's about culturally responsive instruction. It's about academic achievement, reading scores, math scores, all broken out by district. So you probably want to take a look at that. And there's also a recommendation in the very beginning of it. The president of SACE writes a recommendation at the beginning. I've also developed, along with that committee, a DPI module with a DPA liaison, David Wahlberg. At that time, he was the tech liaison to get our models up and running. It's course number 8048, Culturally Responsive Teaching About American Indians, and it's a self-paced course. I would encourage everyone to take that course. It has gotten really good responses, largely, again, from Title VI districts. But it doesn't have to be. Like, you don't have to have a majority of your students be Native in order to have your teachers need to or want to or should be teaching accurately about Natives. So to stop the 300, 400-year perpetuation of stereotypes, that education of teachers is key. The unlearning of the stereotypes, the learning to call them out, learning to call them what they are. And that's what this course helps with. And then, of course, there's also the National Indian Education Association. And I did want to give you, as Dr. Felder pointed out, I did want to give you, where can we go from here? So it's about building relationships. It's about building trust, as you can imagine. So here are my suggestions for things that can be done, places to start. And I put the website in there for the Indian Education Formula Grants. To get that grant, you do have to have one Indian teacher in the district to lead that and 10 Indian students. And if you don't meet that requirement, I would encourage you to think of, well, how else can we make resources available to teach about Native Americans accurately and to teach to Native American families respectfully. So I also wanted to leave time for some discussion and question. So I'm going to stop sharing and hope I left enough time. Sorry, I thought it would go much faster.
That's okay. Thank you so much, Ms. Stewart, for sharing that wealth of information. And I know it's just the tip of the iceberg, and I'm so glad we have 2 more sessions with you. And if we don't have time for all our questions today, maybe some of us can write them out and be prepared so we can share them with you. But who would like to start with questions? I have a few, but I want to go to our other board members first, or others. Please just jump in.
Yeah, I'll start by just saying thank you for putting this together in such a well thought manner, to be able to consume it, because you're right, it's a lot of information, timelines, and, just the various activities. You talked about how history keeps evolving, if you will.
Mm-hmm.
Could you tell me something that you've learned through this that wasn't obvious, that was really surprising, you know, because as we go through it, you know, there's lots of things in there that are, you know, obviously, you know, not the proudest moments of any of our culture, you know. So I'm just curious if there's one that stuck out to you while you were doing that.
You know, I'm not going to say anything earth-shattering. I'm probably going to say exactly what you expect, but it's something I already knew, but I didn't know it so clearly and in this context. I have never gone this deeply into learning about the Indian schools in North Carolina of all tribes before. I've of course known about mine, and I am also involved in writing the history of our tribe, my tribe, but to actually go out and research and learn and find photographs and try to match up dates. You know, there is no source that says, here are all the Indian schools in North Carolina and here's the history of them. You know, there's nothing. It's like a piece here and a piece here, and then you have to match it up with this. And then you have to think, wait a minute, who's telling this gistory? And then you have to go back to the Indians and you have to go to their website and you're like, yeah, I'm going to believe you, not them. So given that, I think that was a huge learning thing for me. And I will say it took me a really long time to make this, because I was not expecting to learn this much about the Indian schools. So I think that, and I think also, this is also going to be something that I also already said, so you're not going to be surprised. To have side by side all the details of the Sappony school, from being abused by teachers and principals, to lack of education, to no funding, to couldn't finish grade levels, putting that side by side with a picture of my grandfather and uncle, to me, that was a shining moment. You know, like, you know what? You tried your best. We are still here. We are still education #1 priority. And I can't say that about all the tribes, because when you look at the State Advisory Council annual reports, Mr. Atherton, it's dismal. It is dismal. Person County is the only one, and we are the only one that has only Sappony in our district. And we're so small that they don't even break out the numbers, because if they say there's 2 that took the 3rd grade EOG, we'll be like, that was Maylene's child. She told him to study more. You know, like, we know who it is, right? So we don't break ours out by numbers because it's that small. But, you know, we are the only Title VI district that does not use Title VI funds only for remediation. We use them for world experiences. We take the kids to Washington, D.C. because they've never been. We take them to the beach because they've never been. The other districts, they have to use them for remediated funding, you know. So to me, to see that right there, here's what you did to us with your schools. Thank you very much for your funding. We'd rather do it ourselves, but okay. And here's where we still are. Here's what got you. You know, like, to me, that was a shining moment.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks for
I'll let others ask questions.
Hillary, do you want to?
I just have a comment also. I just want to thank you, Ms. Stewart, so much for this presentation. And I just want to tell you how much I value this information and what a gift I think you are to our district, that you are a part of our culture here. And I'm just so thankful for this information, and just really want to elevate how important and mission critical I think it is to our district right now to engage with this history, because if we don't understand where we've been, we don't know where we're going. So
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. And I will say in return, it meant the world to me that my home district, my favorite district, the district that I started in, the district that I love, would be doing this.
had a question, Ms. Stewart, about what is your sense of, I was noting, like you mentioned, I think, is it the Lumbee that's the largest tribe with about
Yes.
50,000? So, you know, how much do you feel like there are members that aren't necessarily registered as members? So I'm trying to think, you know, if I was adding up tens of thousands from the different tribes you mentioned, and it's like 100,000, 200,000 people, but do you feel like that's like just a mere fraction, like a tenth of, yeah, and I'm thinking about the clans you mentioned, you know, the 7 families and how many generations that must go. Is that, do you know how many generations the Sappony, I'm sure you do, like when you talk about 7 clans, it's hundreds of people though, right? So I'm thinking of.
So you've opened up a whole can of worms there. There is a difference between being a tribal community member and being an enrolled member. That's the whole can of worms. That's a big debate in Indian country right now, because there's all kinds of stipulations to that, and there's a big debate about what should and shouldn't be a stipulation. The numbers that we have put on this presentation, and I say we because I worked with my daughter, and part of what she did was making these slides from the UNC American Indian Center when she worked there. Those are enrolled numbers.
Right.
So for the Sappony, and I can say probably it's the same thing in the other tribes, every tribe is allowed to state what their qualifications are in order to be an enrolled member. That's our right. So we state what our qualifications are, and every tribe is different. So for the Sappony, we kept our enrollment open for 5 years. For 5 years, we hammered out to the people, get those forms in. We're going to close it. Get those forms in, because we had to present a petition with closed rolls to the BIA for federal recognition. So some people did get it in, and some people were like, wait, you forgot me. How can I not be a member when my brother is? And we're like, sorry, you missed the cutoff. So you do have families where, you know, one brother is an enrolled citizen and the other is not. That doesn't mean that they are both tribal community members, but they're not both enrolled in the tribe because one missed the cutoff. It's a paperwork thing. So that's the answer to that. So yes, there are people who are part of our communities who are not represented on the rolls for various reasons.
And I
Did
know
that answer it?
You did, and I know I kind of went in 3 different directions. I mean, there's so many directions I want to go in, but, and I know we'll come back to because, you know, when we're presented with our, you know, student achievement broken down by ethnicity, I know we all know that we're seeing an underrepresentation of our Native population, and I was just curious about that. And I know Dr. Keeling's aware of the, I want to hear more, and we'll come back to this about sort of qualification as a district, you know, for the grant money and things like that. So I look forward to having more conversation about that.
Mm-hmm.
And I think we can, we had saved some time at the end of the meeting for board discussion that I am happy for us to squish out. So if we can, is it okay with Ms. Braxton and Dr. Dawson if we take a few more minutes for questions before I see Dr. Dawson giving a thumbs up. Okay. So do we have other questions for Ms. Stewart? One thing I'd like to understand better, and if we don't have time, it's okay, but when you talked about like a superintendent, when was it your own superintendent that you selected for yourself, and when was it like an outside, you know, and I'm talking about like the early 1900s, like the state assigned a superintendent to you. maybe one of these resources when we go back, because I know you said you're sharing the slide, so I'll go back and read some of this, but just understanding the difference of like the appointed people versus the self-selected people.
So the self-selected would be our Indian Board of Education. That would be our self-elected, our Indian Board of Education. And so I know my grandfather was on that, Nanny Lou Martin, you know, just some of the bigger leader names in our tribe were on that, as well as parents of the children. So that was our Indian board. But Person County and Halifax County, Virginia, you know, they had their own superintendents attending that meeting as our superintendent. You know what I mean? Like it was, yeah. So I don't know that they particularly cared that we had our own Indian Board of Education, but we did, and we made it standard.
So I want to just say, Ms. Stewart, thank you so much for your presentation. You are certainly a jewel, and we are very, very fortunate to have you in Orange County Schools and to have this opportunity to learn from you. I've learned a lot, and look forward to continuing to process what I've heard and go back and click on the links and just take a deeper dive, and just thrilled to know that you will you've got at least 2 more sessions. You never know. It certainly blossom into more than that in other through other forums and venues. But you know, one of the things you mentioned as an actionable next step would be around building relationships, and you know, that's something that we are seeking to do with a number of you know,
Sorry.
That's okay. Different groups in the district, and even strengthen the partnerships that we have. And I just wondered, based on your experience, any recommendations, anything that come to mind that you have found to be effective with engaging our Native American community in particular? What can we do more of, less of, differently, start doing, stop doing to better engage our Native American families?
I think this goes back to what Dr. Dawson was saying about going into the communities and not always expecting them to come to us. And I think in the case of American Indian communities in particular, if we are going to the Okanichi, well, we need to have an Okanichi person liaison with us to go there and to speak for us. So, you know, I think it's so much a matter of trust. So one of their own that we have spoken with, that we've presented a plan to, that person would know how to present that plan and reach out to those families. So I think having a liaison and having the ability to go to them on their turf would go a long way. And listening, not just listening to say, oh gosh, I'm so sorry that happened, but listening to say, I hear you, I will address that, and then getting back with them after it's addressed. Here's what I did, you know, or listening to them. What do you think would help? And hearing what they want. We've had so many years of, you know, not even being able to call ourselves our own name. You know, we've been told our name, we've been told our school, we've been told what we're good for, you know. We would like to determine that. We would like to be able to say what would be best for our students. So being open to hearing that would be a really good step, and going to them.
Thank you so much. Very helpful.
Thank you, Dr. Felker.
Thanks again, Ms. Stewart. I appreciate so much your trusting us with hearing your story with the juxtaposed success and beauty and trauma and discrimination. And yeah, I know to a small degree how hard it is to hold those things side by side. And I think you sharing both in such an open way. I truly, truly appreciate your willing to share all of that with us.
Sure. Thank you so much for inviting me. I would say if anybody has any questions, I'm certainly open to receiving them. If you'd like it to be a personal question, that's fine too. I'm open to receiving those by email. If you wanted to wait and ask me, if I'm at the next one, that's fine too. Thank you all.
Thank you, Ms. Stewart, so much.
Okay.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's right. I think we have a round of applause. I think we almost missed that. Good, she's still here.
I'm unmuting.
Thank you all. I'm going to go because I have some equity PD I need to do this afternoon.
Right. Excellent.
Yeah. All right.
We'll see you next
Bye,
time.
everybody.
We'll be in touch.
Bye.
Bye-bye. Dr. Dawson, would you like us to take a minute or even just before we go ahead, or are you and Ms. Braxton wanting to just move on into the presentation? It's up to y'all.
I'm sure that Ms. Braxton and her team are ready because they've been preparing and looking forward to their presentation. But of course, we have been here for 2 hours. And but I think everyone is probably taking their own natural breaks as needed. But I want to say that Ms. Braxton is probably ready and her team are ready to go.
Okay, that sounds great. Is that okay with you, Will, if we just proceed?
Yeah.
Great.
Yes.
Great. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you. If you do need to take a break, we're okay with that. Those of you know me well know that I am a very fast talker and I have to consciously make myself slow down so that I can be understood. So are we good to go? I need the ability to share my screen. So Mr. Jones or Mr. Schofield, if one of you could give me that access.